Wrestling might be scripted, but let's be real. It's still two grown folks throwing down and giving each other the business in the ring. And honestly, who doesn't love that?
Time to swim, kid.
What? No! Oh my God!
But every now and then, our fave wrestlers decide to take the drama beyond the ropes. And guess what? It doesn't always end up pretty. Stick around, because we're about to spill the tea on WWE superstars who got into legit brawls outside the ring. Let's kick it old school and rewind to 2005. Picture this. Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle, two absolute legends, were not just throwing down in the ring, but also getting heated backstage. Yep, you heard that right. These dudes had a legit beef behind the scenes. It was about to get real messy, but guess who swooped in to play peacemaker? None other than the Big Show himself, who you might know now as AEW's Paul White. Talk about a giant intervention, am I right? Without him, who knows what chaos might have happened to these two wrestling icons. Eddie Guerrero and Kurt Angle, big-time legends, two of the best ever to hit the ring. Anytime these two fought, it was like watching magic unfold. On top of that, their rivalry was pretty entertaining too, producing some unforgettable matches. The climax of their rivalry hit its zenith at WrestleMania 20. Eddie Guerrero pulled off one of his most epic victories.
But wait a minute! The Puma flying this! Small package! 1, 2, 3, Eddie wins!
Retaining his WWE Championship in a match that fans still rave about today. Seriously, it's one for the history books. The wild part? Despite all the drama, Eddie and Kurt were tight outside the ring, like best buds. It's crazy how they could go from fierce rivals to being as close as brothers when the camera stopped rolling. But just like with any pair of brothers, sometimes things can get a little intense. Eddie Guerrero had been in the wrestling world for a while, but by 2004 his body was feeling the toll. A car accident back in 1999 almost robbed him of his ability to walk, and the after effects stuck with him. Because of that crash, Eddie couldn't quite go all out of the ring like he used to. While all this was going down, Eddie was secretly fighting a battle of his own, a heart disease he didn't even know he had. It was draining him bit by bit. The guy just wasn't the same Guerrero we all knew and loved. He'd get winded fast in the ring, and it drove him absolutely crazy because he couldn't bring his A game like he used to. So, when things went sideways in a match, it wasn't unusual for him to lose his cool and snap at folks backstage. Unfortunately, Kurt Angle was one of those people. After a match, things got a little heated backstage. During the main show, Luther Reigns and Mark Jindrak were the ones beating up on Eddie, while Kurt Angle was just chilling, not even touching him. But once they got backstage, Eddie wasn't having it. He told Kurt he'd been too rough. Kurt, probably scratching his head, was like, "Bro, I didn't even touch you." But Eddie wasn't having it, swearing up and down that Kurt had roughed him up. Things escalated real quick. Classic wrestler drama. Kurt, feeling some type of way, gave Eddie a shove. And Eddie, oh, he wasn't backing down. He tackled Kurt with a double leg takedown like they were still in the ring. But, you know Kurt, he flipped the script in no time and got Eddie in a front headlock. That's when Big Show had to step in, literally lifting them apart and putting them in separate corners like a ref breaking up a brawl. Even though the fight had simmered down, Kurt, still heated, told Big Show, "Don't you ever touch me like that again." Later on, Kurt started feeling that guilt trip and decided it was time to make things right with Eddie. So he heads over to Eddie's locker room to apologize. But when Eddie opened the door, he was like, "Not ready yet." Instead of cooling things down, it just fired them up again. Next thing you know, they're back at it and punches start flying. It wasn't until Bradshaw jumped in that the two were separated again. Looking back, Kurt admitted he should have known Eddie would only apologize when he was good and ready. Classic Eddie, right? Always on his own terms. Let's dive into the Goldberg versus Chris Jericho saga. Goldberg might not have been a WWE mainstay like some of the other legends, but he's had his fair share of epic showdowns and, let's be real, some less than stellar moments too. Jericho though, this dude's had beef with almost everyone at some point, but he's also a master at building solid professional relationships. Back in the WCW days, Bill Goldberg and Chris Jericho were like Goku and Vegeta. Before the Tournament of Power, Goldberg, the muscle-bound juggernaut, and Jericho, the technical wizard, were never on the same wavelength. When Goldberg joined WWE in 2003, their old WCW drama reignited like a Super Saiyan power-up. Goldberg brought not just his brawn, but also a hefty dose of WCW baggage and a chip on his shoulder the size of Kanye West's ego.
Who does he think he is? I just told you who I thought I was, a god. told you.
Word on the street was that Goldberg had been throwing shade at Jericho's wrestling skills behind his back. And let me tell you, Jericho ain't the type to just let that fly. So, what does he do? He marches straight up to Goldberg in the WWE locker room, ready to throw down, and asks him point blank if he's got something to say, he should say it to his face. Goldberg's response? Oh, he didn't waste any time. Dude straight up grabbed Jericho by the throat, and before anyone could say SmackDown, they were in a full-blown brawl. Now you'd think with Goldberg's NFL background and beastly size, he'd have the upper hand, right? But nah, Jericho wasn't about to let that slide. Using his wrestling prowess, Jericho slapped a front-face lock on Goldberg, which for the uninitiated is a legit submission hold. To everyone's shock, Jericho not only held his ground, but actually took Goldberg down to the mat. The two were scrapping like it was the main event at WrestleMania until other wrestlers like Arn Anderson and Booker T swooped in to break it up. Despite Goldberg being built like a tank, Jericho's wrestling skills had him holding his own. The whole thing even made waves in the locker room. Jericho was getting mad props for standing up to Goldberg and coming out on top. Even though he was the smaller guy, it was like he hit a surprise finisher and left everyone stunned. These two eventually called a truce and became good friends. Talk about a heel-to-face turn! Although you shouldn't hold your breath for Santino Marella and Jim Cornette to patch things up anytime soon. Over the years, they've had their fair share of memorable exchanges, even though they hardly crossed paths in the wrestling scene. Real talk, Cornette and Marella have only met face-to-face twice. The first time, Cornette slapped and kicked Santino out of Ohio Valley Wrestling like he was tossing a jobber out of the ring. And the second time, a convention 12 years later, where they both got kicked out. Yeah, they definitely don't mix well like oil and water. Their first fight, it got Cornette fired from OVW, which he later saw as a blessing in disguise. The second meeting started out as a peace offering, but quickly turned rough, like a botched finish. Right now, it looks like one of them might be open to burying the hatchet, while the other isn't too keen on making amends. Alright, let's dive into one of the wilder wrestling rivalries that played out entirely outside the ring, starting all the way back in 2005. According to Marella, it all boiled down to a simple miscommunication. Back then, Marella was an OVW trainee and had his young daughter with him at ringside. She was scared out of her wits by the creepy appearance of the boogeyman. Can you blame her? Dude looked like he walked straight out of a horror anime. Turns out, the boogeyman's makeup was melting under all the lights, which really got Cornette heated. The adult fans were laughing at what was supposed to be a scary character, and Cornette thought Marella was laughing too. But nah, Marella was actually just enjoying his daughter being scared. Miscommunication at its finest, right? Marella's laughter really set Cornette off, like a trigger for a finisher. Marella got hauled backstage, and Cornette ended up slapping him around a dozen times, thinking Marella was making a mockery of one of OVW's top acts by laughing. This whole drama got Jim Cornette fired, and for years, the details were a bit vague, like a kayfabe storyline waiting to be revealed. Eventually, Cornette spoke about it, saying he was at his breaking point, which led to his backstage meltdown. Here's the twist, folks. Even though Cornette admitted he shouldn't have slapped Marella, he launched into another rant just 5 minutes later. He accused Marella of lacking respect for the business and even said he'd gladly slap him again. Classic Cornette, right? But that wasn't the end of their drama. In 2014, when Santino Marella retired because of neck problems, he claimed Cornette left him a voicemail celebrating that he'd never wrestle again. Talk about holding a grudge. Cornette fired back with a scorching promo on a podcast, calling Marella a straight-up liar.
Well, I was never going to allow myself to be one of those people that didn't set the right example. And the right example is around with people's gimmicks and jokes out of their fucking character, as they say these days, then you get the shit slapped out of you. So anyway, another noted liar, Santino Marella.
Fast forward to 2017, Marella and Cornette met again at a fan convention in Detroit. A mutual acquaintance set up the event, and Marella thought it was the perfect chance to settle things once and for all. At the fan convention, Marella tried to make peace with a handshake, but Cornette went off on him first.
You became a joke. Yeah, there's a line. Because you couldn't do anything else. Because you were a fucking show. Get the fuck away from me. I'm trying to walk away from you. Hey, look at this guy. He's trying to start a fight with me, and I'm trying to walk away from
called Marella a Laurinaitis stooge jabroni, who only got his WWE spot because of Cornette's firing. Things got intense real quick, with Marella daring Cornette to slap him again. They had to be pulled apart, and both ended up getting booted out of the convention. Thankfully, Marella and Cornette haven't crossed paths again since that convention, but the bad blood is still very much alive. After all that drama, it's hard to see these two ever making up. Besides his personal beef with Marella, Cornette really doesn't like comedic wrestlers, Booker T and Batista. Before we dive deep, let me hit you with the punchline. No one really knows who won. At the peak of his career, Batista was one of the fan favorites in the WWE. The guy was built like a wrecking ball. No cap. But it wasn't just his size. He brought loads of charisma and intensity to the ring. When Batista first hit the main roster, it took some time for him to really find his feet. But after breaking out from Evolution, Batista became a huge babyface. Even though John Cena was picked as the face of WWE, Batista was still treated like a major star. Rumor has it, all that success went straight to his head, and he started walking around like he owned SmackDown. Batista's cocky attitude didn't sit well backstage, and eventually led to a fight with top star Booker T. This brawl turned into one of wrestling's most notorious backstage scuffles. While it's clear they exchanged blows, the big question is, did Booker T really win, as many initially believed? When news of the fight hit, reports claimed Booker T won decisively, thanks to his street fighting experience. But over time, different accounts from those who were there started popping up, so who really came out on top? If you crossed Booker T, you'd be catching hands, no doubt. And honestly, Batista wasn't feeling him either because Booker was always popping off. Rey Mysterio tried to play peacemaker, but nah, things escalated quick, and next thing you know, they were squaring up. Booker T actually challenged Batista, accusing him of being jealous of his success. Drama alert! Now, the popular tale floating around is that Booker T walked away victorious, but hold up. Witnesses said it wasn't that simple. Apparently, Batista got the upper hand, and the two were scrapping on the floor with Big Dave ending up on top. Booker T caught a black eye in the process, so yeah, it was one wild and messy brawl. Both dudes were banged up after the fight. Booker T was heated, swearing he was coming for Batista, but Batista was equally ready for round two. Kurt Angle even chimed in, noting Booker's black eye, but also pointing out that Batista didn't exactly leave untouched either. So what's the real tea? Maybe a draw? Either way, they were both pretty beat up. A few years later though, Booker T made a point to show respect to Batista. He admitted they weren't exactly besties, but he didn't mind giving the guy props. And get this, more recently, Booker revealed they're actually cool now. Who would have thought? Guess nothing sparks a bromance like a full-blown brawl, right? But while Batista and Booker eventually squashed the beef, Wade Barrett had a completely different kind of drama in 2008, and nah, he wasn't throwing hands with fellow wrestlers. He was throwing down with the police. Wade was looking like a future WWE star as the leader of Nexus, but WWE's mismanagement kept him from staying in the main event scene. That wasn't the only bump in his road though. There's also that infamous pic of him in handcuffs. Yeah, Wade had a little run-in with the law. On June 15th, 2008, while still in WWE's developmental system, Wade got arrested in Tampa, Florida for battery of a law enforcement officer. Not a good look. But before we go wild with assumptions, the situation wasn't as chaotic as it sounded. Apparently, Wade had no clue the dude he was scrapping with was an undercover cop. Oof. After being booked, Barrett was released the next day, and all charges were eventually dropped. It was all a misunderstanding, but that mugshot? A little embarrassing, not gonna lie. WWE probably preferred to sweep that incident under the rug. So, which fight takes the crown for most chaotic? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more wild stories.